and I don't want to tell you anymore, you just tell your story, but her aim is she wants to talk to Parliament.
Yes, yeah. So my name is Morgan Taylor. I'm 22 years old and I'm a patient advocate. And I specifically like spreading awareness on raw cannabis medicine, so juicing cannabis, because in the past that's what's worked amazingly for me. I guess I'll start at age 8. I was diagnosed with an ossifying fibroma, which is a type of tumour, non-malignant tumour in my jaw, and I just started suffering with extreme pain, and I had this huge growth in my jaw, and we were going to doctors and couldn't figure out what it was, and eventually we saw a maxillofacial surgeon and he diagnosed me with that, and I had a 13-hour operation to remove the majority of the right side of my jaw, and had bone graft from my hip and a titanium plate put in, and I've been seeing, you know, surgeons ever since I was 8. And yeah, so that was the first time dealing with the medical system, and realizing how, you know, corrupt and wrong they go about treating patients. And then at the age 12, I started suffering just horrific side effects, symptoms, and I was losing a lot of weight and bleeding, and I couldn't eat, and it was really, really bad. And I ended up, my mum taking me to Westmead Children's Hospital, where they diagnosed me with Crohn's disease. And we spent 8 weeks in hospital there. Mum stayed with me every night. And yeah, it was a really intense time, and they just put me onto the normal drugs that's the only treatment they have. And so I was put on to steroids and another drug called sulfasalazine, and it wasn't really doing much for me. And then the one day that my mum wasn't with me in hospital, I had a hemorrhage, and so I started bleeding from my rectum and lost a huge amount of blood, and a nurse found me on the bathroom floor, and I had to have 20 centimetres of my small intestine removed. And yeah, so I mean, a lot of people think that Crohn's disease is, you know, you just go to the toilet a lot, and it's really not. And it's a really intense autoimmune disease that affects you from your head to your toes. You know, I had horrific symptoms from this disease, and even more horrific symptoms from the treatments to help treat the disease. More often than not, they were worse than the Crohn's itself. And, you know, I have literally been on every single drug there is for Crohn's disease. My doctors call me a medical enigma because I just don't seem to respond to any of these drugs. And I've been on steroids on and off since I was 12, which has now given me osteoporosis. And I've been on Imiran, which made majority of my hair fell out in year 12. And I started bruising and having all these weird side effects, and then went on to another one called Humira, which I had to self-inject, and that made all of my hair fall out, and gave me drug-induced lupus. So my knee was about the size of a rock melon, and I couldn't walk. It left me crippled. And then I've also been on Entyvio, Stelara. I've been on a bunch of painkillers. It's just, I would cry to my doctors saying, you know, these medications that you're giving me, which is the only treatment that they have other than removing your whole intestine, which doesn't help. And they were just frustrated themselves because they felt like, you know, a lot of their patients aren't responding to these medications, and they're ending up having horrific side effects. So, you know, my parents were just at their wits' end because they had 2 sick daughters. So my older sister also has Crohn's disease. And at one point we shared a hospital room together because we were in at the same time. And at that point, my sister had emergency surgery to remove her entire colon because the drugs weren't working for her. And, you know, my parents were having to carry me into hospital at 32 kilograms because, you know, none of the drugs were working for me. And So my mum in 2014 spent a lot of time researching about Crohn's disease and what could help. And she just kept finding cannabis coming up. And specifically a woman over in America called Justine Meter, who had severe Crohn's disease, had it for 15 years, and just like me, wasn't responding to any of these medications. And so she started juicing cannabis leaves after recommendation from Dr. William Courtney, who is a doctor over in America, and he is the leading doctor, I guess you would say, on juicing cannabis. So he has done a lot of research into it, and the thing about juicing raw cannabis is you can get really high dosages of the healing cannabinoids without getting any of the psychoactive effects, which really appeals to a lot of people. And you're getting the THCA and the CBDA, which has a lot of therapeutic values, especially in Crohn's disease. And so, my mum and dad just thought, why not? Let's try it, because there wasn't really much else for me left. And so we did. My parents started growing, and in 2016, I started juicing, and within a month, all of my symptoms were gone, and I was able to eat, and I put on weight, and I was working. And then the plants unfortunately died because it was really, really hot that summer, and we got a lot of rain, so all the plants they were all outdoors and organic, so they all just died. And once again, I got sick again and ended up in hospital, and they put me on another drug, which didn't work. So we started growing again. My mum and dad started growing for me and my sister again. And it was December 2017 when they were just ready to start juicing again, when we got a knock at the door, and it was New South Wales Police with a search warrant for our property, because we don't know for sure, but we think our neighbours could see over the fence and dogged us in. And so I was really, really sick at the time when they came to the house, and I just remember this feeling of dread coming over me, and I went outside and started throwing up because I was just so scared. And the minute that they got there, they realised that this wasn't what they were expecting at all. They were expecting a drug bust and to find money and scales and signs of drug dealing, and yet they found colostomy bags and suppository moulds and organic plants growing in the backyard, and they all felt bad. We could tell that they did not want to be there, and they had to turn our house upside down, and they were looking for money and things like that, and they couldn't find anything. They were just taking out all of our oils and things. And the really weird thing is I had capsules next to my bed, and they had a cannabis leaf on top of the box, and they left that, and yet they took all this other stuff. I don't know why. So that was a really, really hard time. Not only were my sister and I sick, but we were now having to face court and the possibility of my dad going to jail because my parents were trying to do the one thing that actually helped us. And so we were lucky enough to get onto the ABC, and they did a report on our family. And after that, we got contacted by the amazing lawyer, Sally McPherson, who took on our case. And it was a very stressful time for me. It sent me into another flare just purely from stress, and I had a lot of guilt from the whole situation. And it was really tough, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And luckily enough, we got off. My father got off, and he only got a 6-month good behaviour bond. And it was really interesting because the police prosecutor was pretty much on our side in the court. He was giving evidence in our favour. So either he was being told to make this go away because we made a big stink about it. There was a lot of people supporting us, and they were just outraged with what was happening. Or he just, he felt for us because he had children himself, and he said that. And he did say to Dad, I have children, and I would have done the same thing. So it just shows that there's a lot of people in power themselves that support the issue, but they can't publicly say that because they don't want to be ostracized. And it was just, the whole experience was just laughable. I mean, my dad was facing jail because of a plant that we were growing in our backyard, and I was juicing. Like, we literally, I wasn't even smoking it. Like, I was purely taking the leaves off. We didn't have any buds on the plants or anything like that. And they said they released that we had 107 plants, but majority of them were like that size. So then we had all these people saying, well, that was just ridiculous. Why did they have 107 plants? But you need a lot of plants in order to juice anyway. You really need a large supply, which makes it hard for a lot of people. And it's not, right now, it's not really a viable way of taking in cannabis medicine because it involves a large supply of plants. So yeah, it was definitely a really, really tough time. And I just think the way the system is right now is they are obviously trying to put all these loopholes in place to stop people from trying cannabis. And the thing I say to that is just do it anyway, because even though we were caught and we had to go through that system, I would do it all over again because of what we've been able to do because of it. We've been able to tell our story and, you know, help other people. I've had people come to me and say, you inspired me to try cannabis for my Crohn's disease, and that makes it all worth it in the end, really, because I think it's just barbaric that people, I mean, when it comes to the healthcare system, we don't have a say a lot of the time in our health, and I think a lot of patients out there are forced into treatment when they really don't want to do it. And like, for instance, I couldn't get any kind of government support because they told me I hadn't tried every medication yet. So then I was forced into trying more medications that gave me more side effects purely because they wouldn't give me any kind of funding or anything like that. So it's a really messed up system, and I think it's very hard for a lot of people, and I know that, and a lot of people don't know where to go to access medicine, and I say purely just grow it yourself and make your own medicine and do the research, because that's what you have to do. You just have to take your health into your own hands and be your own advocate. And I think, you know, a lot of people ask, what can we do to help? I think you just need to start researching the whole cause and reaching out to politicians. I mean, in the beginning of the year, the UN was supposed to vote on descheduling cannabis from the number 4 narcotic scheduling. What is it? The single convention. So cannabis is a Schedule 4 drug, which means it's amongst drugs such as heroin and methamphetamine and things like that, which have no therapeutic value. And the UN was supposed to vote on that from advice from the World Health Organization, who was saying that it should be removed from the Schedule 4, and they postponed that vote for a second time. So I'm not really sure when they're doing that again. I think it's next year that they're voting on that again, but it's issues like that that you need to be educated on and talk to your local politicians or federal politicians and bring up things like that and say, what will you be doing when that vote comes around again? How will you be voting? Do you know about this issue, and are you educated on it? And I think educating yourself and educating others is a really, really big thing that we can all do. I think, you know, voices are louder in numbers. So the more that we talk about this issue and don't shut up about it, then the less that they can keep pushing it under the rug. And I think it's really, really important to spread awareness on the issue.
How are you going now with the medicine that, like, if you haven't got plants to juice, have you found another way of dealing with it?
Yeah, so juicing works really well for me, but I think you have to use a lot of different methods at the same time. So I wasn't just juicing. I'm making my own suppositories and I was using oils and things, but juicing is what really, really helped me at the time until I could find something that was working. But right now I'm using CBD oil, which has changed my life, really. Like, I have a a huge appetite now, and I've been able to put on weight, and my pain has stopped. I'm not having to take painkillers, and it's really about trial and error and finding what works for you, because what works for somebody else may not work for you. I think that's where people get really discouraged, because they'll try something that someone said worked for them, and then it doesn't work for them. So yeah, I just really suggest trial and error and trying what works for you.
I just want to back up what Morgan's saying then. One of the biggest things we've discovered, because we have been helping people access medicine, and I can help you if you need. There's people outside who can help you. There's a couple of things. It's super safe.
Yeah.
I love how safe it is that hippies are gamed us, or whatever. We won't talk anymore. And the other thing is, we've got a motto pretty much: start low, go slow. Yeah. And everybody's different. Yeah. I just want to really, but everyone seems to have a different endocannabinoid system, different whatever, reactions. So a lot of people, I think, have tried, had a dose and didn't work, nothing, what bullshit. But you do have to experiment.
Yeah, it really
in America, where it's legal, but they're totally into the science now of different strains for different ailments. Mm-hmm. We can't get that together at all under prohibition. But you really do have to persevere. It's super safe. Find what works for you.
And that can be frustrating for people, because if you don't have the time to play around, it can be hard. But I think that is the main thing. Like, we spent a lot of time taking medicine from people, and it didn't do anything, because it just didn't work for me, but it works for somebody else. Yeah. So it really is, I think, trial and error.
So she's now discovered a CBD oil in MCT. Mm-hmm. It's coming out of America, and they've had 20 years, more than 20 years legal. It got legal in California in 1996, medical cannabis. That's how far behind we are.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Anyway, isn't she a little star? There's a question?
Yeah, when we're juicing, how many leaves we need to juice, and how much juice a day we want?
Yeah, so I really suggest checking out Dr. William Courtney's website. It's called Cannabis International, and he has a lot of information online about that, and he will specifically tell you how much you need. But he suggests 30 mils 3 times a day, so 90 mils. And in order to get 30 mils, it is about 40 grams worth of leaf material. So it's a lot of leaf. Imagine like one of those big metal bowls. It's like that, full of leaves 3 times a day. And anyone who grows plants knows that if you're constantly stripping the leaves, then the plant's going to die. So you have to have a large supply of plants, which makes it hard. But if you can grow some plants, and then he even suggests juicing a bunch and then putting it into ice cube trays and freezing it. That's a really, really good method. Or if you know people that are growing and they're just throwing away their leaves, juice it. I'd suggest getting I have a Vitalmax juicer, it's called, and it's a slow press juicer. So you can't really use just any old juicer. It has to be a slow press one, or a wheatgrass juicer, because cannabis is so dry. If you're just putting it through a normal juicer, you're not going to get very much, and it's going to be a waste of material that way.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. What Dr. Courtney says is, if you're going to juice cannabis leaves, you really need to have high CBD strains to use. So that's important. High CBD strains, you're going to juice it. And you're going to be getting the full entourage effect, too. That's another thing. Plus, you will be getting huge quantities of cannabinoids you can never get from hot products, which is why it works so well, by the way.
We had this 79-year-old American woman, Elvie Masaka, at Mardi Gras here. She was just a gem. She had glaucoma, she couldn't see, and she could see at 5% or something, and she reckons she'd had all these operations earlier in her life, which had stuffed her eyes up. And then she discovered cannabis. If she'd had cannabis all her life, she'd have been okay, I thought. Anyway, she looked really good, 79, and her secret was, she reckoned, wherever she was, she would grab a handful of cannabis in the morning, buds or leaves or whatever, and put it in the blender. With her juice, yogurt, she's eating the lot, everything. It was interesting. It is hard to get much juice out of cannabis. I'm all for eating heaps of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, I really want to thank Morgan. She's a beauty. And And Andrew, now I've got Andrew Cat.